Well, this is an administration, the Biden administration. They have their priorities straight. They say on foreign policy, the most important thing, like a singular focus of our foreign policy, is the Pride Progress flag. Yeah, man. The biggest unnoticed story yesterday, it was noticed a little bit, people don't care about foreign policy, is the continued cementing of the relationship between Russia and China. According to the Washington Post, Russian President Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping on Tuesday proclaimed their plans to deepen Sino-Russian political and economic cooperation for years to come, sending a strong message to the West about their determination to push back against the global domination of the United States. One of the basic ideas of pushing back against Russia in Ukraine was the idea that it would warn China off of a close relationship with Russia. Apparently, China has faith that whatever sort of strictness we are using with Russia will not apply to China. As the leaders wrapped up 2 days of formal discussions in Moscow, there was no visible progress on China's ceasefire plan for Ukraine. At an ornate meeting room in the Kremlin, Xi described his visit as a new chapter in strengthening relations between Beijing and Moscow. Xi on Tuesday invited Putin to visit China this year, signaling the most assertive joint stand against the West was just getting started. So this is all joined with the fact that the Middle East is now being surrendered to Chinese leadership. As you'll recall, just last week, the Saudis and the Iranians signed some sort of deal brokered by China. And that was almost solely due to the fact that the Americans decided they were going to alienate Saudi Arabia, allowing China to open up a rapprochement with Saudi Arabia and Iran. And then Joe Biden is on the sidelines cheering it. So at the same exact time that Joe Biden is saying, Russia's really bad and China shouldn't be helping them out, he's like, well, China should also be helping out with peace in the Middle East. This is perfect Barack Obama lead from behind garbage. Barack Obama did the exact same thing. You'll recall. Barack Obama, it was 2014. And you'll recall that Russia actually invaded Crimea in 2014, and Barack Obama was president. And while he was saying it was really terrible for Russia to be doing that, he was also ceding territory in Syria to Russia so that they could lead the charge in the Middle East. This is pure Obama leading from behind garbage. It has real ramifications for literally hundreds of millions of people around the world, including Americans. But we are told by this administration that Joe Biden's actually an expert on this sort of stuff. John Kirby, who is the national security spokesperson for the president, he says that Joe Biden has a great feel on foreign policy. He was mixing up Joe Biden's feel on foreign policy with feeling up the heads of small children. But here we go.
His fine feel and touch, particularly on issues of foreign policy and national security,
the hand motion
is very, very distinct. And he asks great questions. There's not a single engagement that I've ever had with him where he wasn't pushing and pressing and wanting more detail and wanting a deeper level of context. He thinks these things through carefully. And I can tell you, this I know for sure, certainly, because of my job at the Pentagon, too, before I came here, that when it comes to putting America's men and women in uniform in harm's way, you won't find another commander-in-chief who thinks more carefully, deliberately, and consciously about that than President Biden.
Well, I mean, except for, the 13 American service members who were murdered at the end of his Afghanistan pullout and the hundreds of Americans who were left behind and all of that. Sure. It's been going great under Joe Biden. One of the reasons it's been going so great, according to John Kirby, is because of our foreign policy priorities. Now, you might think that America's foreign policy priorities are things like America's national interests. Like what's good for Americans? Securing global supply chains, for example, or pushing back against the predations of America's enemies, China and Russia, for example. You might think that those would be actual priorities. But John Kirby is here to tell you that one of the top priorities is making sure that you can trans the kids in like Romania. It's very, very important that LGBTQ plus minus divided by sign rights be advanced everywhere around the globe. Now, I noticed that he's not saying that so much about like China. And I noticed that he is not saying that so much about like the Middle East, like while he's attempting a rapprochement with Iran. I've noticed that he's pretty selective in where he thinks LGBTQI minus, like how's it going in Afghanistan for the LGBTQs? Going great over there, is it? But apparently this is like this is the thing that the administration cares about. When it comes to foreign policy, the thing that matters more than anything is not the American interest. It is that we make sure that every person can live their best selves as the member of the opposite sex and or shtup whomever they please. This is not, I'm sorry, this is not an American foreign policy interest. It just isn't. You can say that you think that that people all over the world should have more sexual freedom. Okay, that may be your moral priority. That has nothing to do with America's generalized foreign policy interests, which have to do with America's national security, which have to do with America's economic growth. Those are the foreign policy priorities of the United States. Not flying the Pride Progress flag outside the Vatican. Well, if the Biden administration foreign policy seems unhealthy, that's because it is. But you know what you have to do? Make sure that you retain your health in case of, God forbid, some sort of foreign policy crisis. And when a foreign policy crisis hits, it actually could have ramifications for things like supply chains. And this is why you need the Jace case. It is a supply of the 5 most common antibiotics you need in your home in case you can't get to the CVS or the CVS doesn't even have the antibiotics you need. You call up my friends over at Jace Medical and they can facilitate that. But that's not all they are doing. They're offering my audience a free ebook every family needs in their emergency preparedness kit. The ebook is maybe a 5-minute read. You should download it and save it so you have it when you need it. The guide provides valuable information regarding emergency wound care, proper first aid, and how to safely use antibiotics when necessary. Get this free ebook today at jacemedical.com/Ben. That's JASEmedical.com/Ben. My wife's a doctor, so she knows a lot of this stuff already, but what if she's not home when the emergency arises? That's why I have printed out that ebook. You should do the same. Get the free ebook today at jacemedical.com/Ben. That's JASEmedical.com/Ben. While you're at it, apply for that Jace case as well. Again, jacemedical.com/Ben. Well, the Biden administration has caused a lot of chaos and death, and if that puts you in mind of death itself, perhaps you should spend this time getting some life insurance. It's just that simple. You need life insurance. You got dependents, got to make sure they're taken care of in case, God forbid, something terrible happens to you. Policy Genius makes it easy to compare those life insurance quotes from the top companies and find your lowest price. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $25 per month for $1 million in coverage. Some options offer coverage in as little as a week and avoid those unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius's licensed agents can help you find coverage options in as little as a week. They work for you, not the insurance companies, which means they don't have an incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can actually trust their guidance. There are no added fees. Your personal information remains private. Your loved ones deserve that financial safety net. You deserve a smarter way to find and buy it. Head over to policygenius.com/Shapiro or click the link in the description. Get your free life insurance quotes. See how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Shapiro. Again, policygenius.com/Shapiro. If you have dependents, you got to make sure that they are taken care of in case, God forbid, something terrible happens to you. Head over, get the life insurance you need. policygenius.com/Shapiro. Here's John Kirby. Here we go.
President Biden has been nothing but consistent about his foundational belief in human rights, and LGBTQ plus rights are human rights. And we, again, back to the earlier question, are never going to shy away, be bashful about speaking up for those rights and for individuals to live as they deem fit, as they want to live. And that's something that's a core part of our foreign policy, and it will remain so.
By the way, good luck with wooing countries that do not agree with that as a matter of morality. Seriously, you're trying to build alliances with various countries around the world that don't happen to share the Western European morality that suggests that sexual self-determination is the core of who we are. And your pressing matter is going, the Prime Minister of Pakistan be like, guys, we really need to work on your queer outreach. I'm sorry, that by no measure is that at the tip of the spear of the American foreign policy interest. But remember, Joe Biden is amazing at this. All of these issues should be at the core of any presidential conversation come 2024. The question is whether Republicans are going to choose to put that stuff at the core. Are they going to choose to put financial issues at the core? All of these issues are on the table for Joe Biden. Or at least they should be if the focus were on the current president, who is garbage at his job. Speaking of finances and the Biden administration's handling, if you think that the financial crisis is anywhere close to over, wrong you are. Your first indicator is when Janet Yellen is telling you everything is great. And there apparently is a site online that is called Reverse Jim Cramer. And the basic idea is that inverse Jim Cramer, it's an ETF, and it lets you actively bet against Jim Cramer of CNBC's picks. And apparently it does amazing business. If you just do the precise opposite of Jim Cramer's picks, you apparently do great. And the same thing is true of Janet Yellen. When Janet Yellen makes a prediction, you can guarantee that within 6 months she will be reversing that prediction. So now she says the financial system remains sound. All righty.
We announced a new facility to provide additional liquidity to the banking system. The Fed's new lending facility, the Bank Term Funding Program, is designed to help banks meet the needs of all of their depositors. The situation is stabilizing, and the U.S. banking system remains sound.
Well, that's weird because you said in the same press conference that we might need additional banking resources and rescues in order to fill in gaps. So it doesn't sound all that sound, actually.
We worked with the Federal Reserve and FDIC to protect all depositors in the resolutions of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. The steps we took were not focused on aiding specific banks or classes of banks. Our intervention was necessary to protect the broader U.S. banking system. And similar actions could be warranted if smaller institutions suffered deposit runs that pose the risk of contagion.
So, that's odd. You say there's further risk of contagion and you're going to stop it? Well, I thought that the risk was over. So lawmakers are apparently now attempting to raise the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation's bank deposits backing. Some members of Congress apparently are looking for ways to boost the $250,000 cap, which of course completely destroys all risk assessment for these banks. When you keep filling in the depositors, what you are essentially doing is you are saying to bank managers that they can promise any level of return whatsoever to the depositors, and no matter what happens, the FDIC is there to bail them out. And that's going to be a problem. You know what else is going to be a problem? According to the Wall Street Journal, strains in the banking sector are roiling a roughly $8 trillion bond market, considered almost as safe as U.S. government bonds. So-called agency mortgage bonds are widely held by banks, insurers, and bond funds because they're backed by mortgage loans from government-owned lenders like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The bonds are far less likely to default than most debt. They're easy to buy and sell quickly. That is a crucial reason they were SVB's biggest investment before it foundered. But agency mortgage-backed securities, like all long-term bonds, are vulnerable to rising interest rates, which pushed their prices down last year and saddled banks like SVB with unrealized losses. Now that the FDIC has taken over SVB, investors expect the bonds to be sold off in the coming months, adding supply to the weakened market and pushing prices lower. So in other words, if the big problem for SVB is that they had unrealized losses in the bond market, and then there was a run on the bank, and they had to liquidate those assets really fast, and they didn't have enough money to liquidate the assets, you're about to see some more of that. Alrighty, guys, the rest of the show continues right now. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be getting into the mailbag. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click the link in the description and join us.